See, I give people a chance to come on. All right, look, this is take two, episode 46, take two, dose. Bear with me while, wow, some of you guys are quick, man. I'm glad. Look, we just did the backup here. I went to add Robert. The whole damn thing just crashed. That was, yeah, I don't know what to tell you. That has never happened.
Never,
ever. I don't even know what it was. But I did send the invite to Robert. Bear with me, folks. Give me a second to try to get people
to come in.
Yeah, but also I got to send them I got to go to locals and I got to send them a new thing. I got to end the live chat and everything. Can you end the live chat that I did? And I'll just do take two here. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. I'll give them a take two, folks, and bear with me. It should be actually fairly easy for me to get the graphics back up. All right.
And I'll share the new one.
Yep. And I'll give you guys a live chat on locals. Doing it right now. Okay. Where are you? There we go. All right. So I was about to add Robert so I could get his take on it. Weird, man. Weird. All right. I'm afraid to try to upload any damn graphics. I really am. But I'm going to try. That's add a video. Ooh, things have been different since we needed this backup. It's kind of cool, actually. It's pretty neat. Ooh, I got some old stuff in here, too. Delete, though. Let me get rid of a lot of this crap. I mean, I frankly don't need it. The last thing I need is things to go haywire. You know what I mean? So while I do this and we wait for Robert, I'll delete and re-upload stuff that we need. All right. Where was I? Where did I leave off with Brian Kemp? Yes, Brian Kemp will lose re-election. I'm telling you straight up, that is going to happen. We didn't pull a head-to-head matchup, but his +6, rounded up, +7 approval rating is being fueled by about 3 in 10 Democrats who don't like Brian Kemp because he thumbed his nose at Donald Trump, because he stuck his little finger in Donald Trump's eye. That is why they don't like that's why they're telling us that they like Brian Kemp. It's both sugar.
Crap.
By the time, and here's Robert. Robert, you there?
Hey.
What the hell? What just happened? I've never seen happen us. And I went to add you and it just totally, everything just crashed. It was weird. So while I get your thoughts though on this, I'll try to get some of these graphics that we had set for the show today and add them, because you saw Georgia. I sent it to you over the weekend. Starting with Brian Kemp, approved +6, 7 if you round up, really doesn't mean anything when a quarter of your own base can't stand your guts, Robert. And a third, 33% of Democrats are saying, yeah, I approve of Governor Brian Kemp. But will they vote for him when Stacey Abrams or whoever the hell it is becomes their nominee? He's going to lose, man.
What is so how is Vernon Jordan doing currently?
You know, he absolutely needs he needs Donald Trump's endorsement, man. I mean, that's all there is to it. Kemp is actually beating him, and if he doesn't get Donald Trump's endorsement, he's not going to be able to beat him in the primary. If he does, an endorsement in Georgia by Donald Trump is a 50-point swing, man. 50 points. Vernon Jones is trailing him by about 40 points, 35, 40 points. And then we asked, what if Donald Trump endorsed Vernon Jones? Then what? And then Vernon Jones pulls in the lead and Kemp falls. Kemp falls about 22, I think roughly, I don't have it in front of me, 20-something points. And Vernon Jones, adds 20 points. So it's 25 points. It's a 50-point swing.
You know, right now, Vernon Jones is really not well known, I'm assuming.
That's really what his campaign is, just not catching fire. People really just don't know who he is. And then there is a small section who I hate to do this to any man or anybody because I don't have any of this confirmed. There's just whisperings, and it could be a plan. Could be somebody else's campaign planning it. But they're saying that Donald Trump hasn't endorsed Vernon Jones because it was something he found out about that he didn't like.
But who else is he? I mean, he doesn't want Kemp to win, so who else is he going to back?
Exactly. And
is there somebody else thinking about running?
It's something, David. I kid you not, that over the weekend somebody told me that they were going to try to get David Perdue to run.
Oh, I mean, that's the same problem. The Perdue family
Dude,
is the whole reason why the Republican political class is incompetent in that entire state. I dealt with them personally. I mean, Sonny was down there too.
Yep.
I mean, the Republican machine in Georgia was contaminated by the Perdue effect. These were old boy, old money, country club, corrupt lobbyist style Republicans.
Yeah.
I mean, Lord knows how much money the Perdue family made while his son was Secretary of Agriculture. Let's just put it that way.
Right.
And they rewarded Trump by sabotaging him in the election. So, well, why anyone would want to be anywhere near any of those guys is beyond me. So if they think there's some limitation on Vernon because he was a Democrat a few years ago or whatever, then okay.
It's something to do with like some kind of discrimination thing. I don't want to repeat whispers that are BS. There was something that was reported, but it was something that was like a little bit more widespread. And I'm told by one side it's total bullcrap, and it's garbage. It's from Kemp. And then I hear from some people who think that I don't know, maybe it's possible they're just afraid Vernon Jones can't pull it off, man.
Right. I mean, he's not well known, but we're 18 months away.
Right.
Well, I guess 13, 14. Well, hold on a second. I guess 6 months from the primary, aren't we?
Well, the primary's coming up, yes. But, the question is whether or not he can get a statewide name recognition by the time the general rolls around. He's got almost a year and a half.
I guess and is it a party only primary, or can anybody vote in it?
Anybody can vote in it. And what's interesting dynamic here, Herschel Walker is dragging people into a Republican primary that this won't surprise you because I know how I know you understand this, but some people would never expect or anticipate that Herschel Walker would bring these kind of people into a Republican Party. So minorities are significantly, African-American voters are about 6 points higher than you would expect them to be in a Republican primary. And then there's just a group of people you probably wouldn't even expect to vote. They tell you in this, I don't want people can go look at the crosstabs and give it away, but they have no vote history and they want to vote for Herschel Walker. It's like a 4% slice of the electorate, 3.5%, but still, these are people that do not intend, and you can see it if you look at the Senate preference and compare it to the generic ballot, for instance. They don't even care. They have no interest in it at all, and they just, they may leave it blank for all I know, Robert. I don't know what they're going to do when they get there, but it's a big chunk of people who are, I'm definitely voting for Herschel Walker. That's so cool, and that's it. That's a wrap.
Interesting.
Yeah, it's funny. It is.
Now, did you have any thoughts on unless somebody else is going to run, Trump's going to endorse Vernon. So unless somebody else gets in, he's not he's obsessed with Kemp losing.
Yeah.
He's made that clear repeatedly. So unless somebody else is going to enter, and they better enter pretty quick to get into the primary at this stage.
Yeah.
Then sooner or later, Vernon's a good bet because Trump will endorse whoever the viable alternative to Kemp is. That's going to happen. It's just a matter of time. Now, any thoughts on who Trump? I guess there was some controversy over who Trump chose in Wyoming. I don't know the backstory. I just know some people on the ground thought he did not make the best choice, but I don't have any. Did you have any additional sense on that?
Yeah, I think that I'm reluctant to give people, like it's all right, it's better than Liz Cheney. It's sometimes you have a fallout with people. And this is what the story is, that yes, this is like a Liz Cheney ally at one point, was a buddy of the Cheney family, but is not now. So that is the assurance that they're supposed to be giving. I don't know if that's true though, Robert, so I guess we're going to find out. Honestly, I hate to say it, but Trump's history of this is not good. And you know it. So when I heard about it and people are like, oh no, you don't understand. This is big bad blood over there. And I'm like, I also got a call from John Bolton's friend a good friend, trying to convince me he wasn't a neocon anymore. Me. So, I mean, I can't imagine what they did to Trump in the White House and the people who surround him, and they convinced him. So Trump has a horrible track record of this. He's right on the verge of choosing somebody more like a John Ratcliffe for the attorney general. And GW rolls in because of Poppy's, funeral and tells him, no, you got to go for Bill Barr. He's totally different. He's not that. And he buys it. I just don't.
Yeah. I mean, I always say you don't have to take my word for it that Trump picks the worst people. Just listen to Trump. I mean, he complains about them repeatedly. Man, that was a terrible pick. Man, he doesn't call it a terrible pick. He just says they did a terrible job. But clearly, who was it that picked him? It wasn't the Invisible Man.
Yeah.
And so that part's unfortunate. So we'll see. I mean, I think some of his other picks, Parnell in Pennsylvania, I thought was a good one.
Me too.
Some other play. It's people that are being smart on the election issue are getting his attention, and that it's breaking through his otherwise
Joe Kent,
poor choices.
Joe Kent, another good one.
Yeah,
that was a little bit after.
Yeah. Well, that's because she voted for impeaching Trump. So that was a guarantee that he was going to oppose. The problem for him is going to be if he gets stuck with her in a runoff.
Yeah.
The way Washington State works.
Yep.
He'll be one of the two. But the question is whether a Democrat is in there or she's in there. And then the problem is all she has to do is win all the Democrats and a few Republicans, and then she wins.
Yeah. And it's always a very tough district. There's like the old school kind of Republican that's going to back her. And then there's a very big blue collar element in Washington 3. That's why it's always such a very tough race to win. It's changed so much. Like the formula for each party has changed in the last 10, 12 years. It's, reverse now. Before Obama and in the era of Obama, those Trump voters were Democratic candidate voters, and that's totally changed now because they've gotten so radical. So it's going to be a tough one, but yeah, let me show you. Is this it? Yeah, it is. Let me show you what it is, and then I'll give you the numbers exactly after a Trump endorsement for Vernon Jones before we move on here. This is how badly Vernon Jones is losing when it comes to can I do this here? That's a share. Yeah, this is how badly Vernon Jones is losing to Brian Kemp before the endorsement. He straight up just asked. There's very clearly a lot of people who don't know who the heck he is, Robert. And 25% undecided. Then when you tell, you ask them, well, what about if Donald Trump isn't endorsing Vernon Jones? Then Vernon moves from just under 15% to 40. So he actually grabs 25 points. And Kemp collapses to 32. So Vernon pulls ahead by a little bit. So, I mean, we're talking about a significant shift if Donald Trump endorses Vernon Jones. If he endorses Brian Kemp, Kemp gains 4 points. Right. That's it.
Well, it's going to be a cold day in hell before that happens anyway.
Yeah. I just had to be fair, man. I had to be fair and I had to ask.
Yeah, I mean, what Kemp is basically it's a name recognition problem that he has. And I assume fundraising has been so for him. How's that been?
Not great. Not bad, but not great. I had spoken with somebody I knew, called me out of the blue, and said, hey, look, the Jones campaign had a poll conducted by, I think it was like Remington Research or something. And Remington gave them a Kemp +6. And somebody I knew who was talking to people in Vernon Jones's campaign said, I'll be honest with you. And this was months ago, Robert. He said, I'll be honest with you. I think Remington's blowing smoke up your butt because you have aside from, really staunch Republican Trump voters, you don't have name recognition. And I seriously doubt you're trailing Kemp 46-40 or whatever it was.
They had to push that. But those polls, they often do that. I remember my first experience with congressional campaign polling, Democratic primary 1994 for Congress. And the pollsters really liked this professional class guy from the Oak Ridge portion of the district, whose name was Ram Upaluri or something like that. And they liked him, so they structured a poll that said he was the great threat, and that he, that you had to focus on that aspect and appeal to the professional class and also other jazz. they completely underestimated a guy named Randy Button, who went around giving out, who's from the rural part of the district.
Yeah, I remember this. Yeah, go ahead.
He went around passing out buttons. That was his way of getting name recognition. Just but his name Button on a button. And I remember sitting there with a guy who's now a federal judge. We had a line that said, "When the beer ran out, our votes ran out." It was a fascinating election night, but it turned out that poll. I remember from the get-go saying that poll makes no sense to me. It was our own primary campaign pollster, and I was like, "There's no way people are voting for a guy whose name in East Tennessee they can't pronunciate and spell. It just ain't happening." And of course, that's why that guy finished fourth. And we totally ignored the little Randy Button guy who ended up winning the primary. We had another competition with a big local drug company lobbyist. I helped him take him out with a great campaign ad, old school adversarial campaign style. That was great. He tried to pretend he wasn't a drug company lobbyist. He tried to pretend he was a doctor, like he was a pharmacist. They put him in a white lab coat walking around.
I was just going to say white lab coat, man.
Loves to heal people and all that jazz. Kind of like our current FDA and CDC.
Yeah, no kidding.
Big pharma lobbyists pretending to be doctors and physicians. But it was educational. I mean, it's amazing how bad those internal, and I don't think pollsters understand. I mean, I get part of it. You sell the ego and you get a paycheck, but I think ultimately they do themselves a disservice because they don't prepare their candidate well. They don't prepare the campaign well.
Yeah.
Everybody knows the scam that's up, and it's like, well, why do it? What you want is honest information and intel.
Yeah, and here it is. I mean, you can see this is a name recognition issue, Robert. Look, right there. If Donald Trump endorses Vernon Jones in the Republican primary for governor, for whom would you vote? Vernon goes from less than 15% to 40%, and Brian Kemp falls from about in the mid-50s to 33.6%. Huge swing, but it's also indicative that there are so many people who don't know him. And then we did hear quite a bit from the North, of course, the Northern Republican.
No,
I don't think Vernon Jones can win. I don't know
if they don't like him, then someone like Doug Collins should look at getting in.
Yeah.
I thought he was thinking about getting in.
That would have been a consensus. I think that would have been more of a consensus.
He was pretty good during the election stuff. Not perfect, but pretty good. He was
better.
He started out by cussing me out, and then he became friends quickly after. After he talked to Trump, actually. He cussed me out, then he was got on the phone with Trump, and he's like, hey, Barnes, I was just
He has a way of straightening people out.
Yeah, exactly. Yes, he does. He does. He was totally, I mean, it was a complete 180. Complete 180. He was right about how he summed up Kemp. He said from the very beginning, he goes, Kemp's a total wuss. He said Kemp won't do anything for us if anything hits. If he could hide out the entire time, he would. And he read Kemp right. And but I mean,
what a piece of garbage.
If someone else isn't getting in, then Vernon's gonna be the guy because it's Trump's gonna ultimately endorse and push him over the edge. Just because he hates Kemp so much. And I think, for a general election, I think you're better off with Vernon against Stacey Abrams than you are Kemp. I think that the bitterness towards Kemp amongst about a fifth of the party, too big. He's dead. If you don't want to governor Stacey Abrams, you got to back somebody other than Kemp.
Yeah, it's like a quarter who doesn't like Kemp, and if you look, here's his approval right here. But it's garbage, man. I mean, if we look at by party, let's go to party detail, actually, just so we can separate those third-party voters. Go to party detail, and I mean, first of all, third-party voters, 5% strongly approve. Another 24% somewhat approve. Look at him among independents. He's at 34%. He's also at 44% 44% disapprove, excuse me. He's split at 44 among independents, roughly. And 26.8% of Republicans disapprove of him, nearly 3 in 10 of his own voters. I mean, the sampling error in this poll is 3 points, so plus or minus 3. And then Democrats here, these people are not right here, guys. They're not going to vote for him.
No.
When they get their own candidate, he's done. He's finished, and he's going to. I think he'll end up worse than Perdue and Lawful.
Oh, yeah, I agree with that. He has no chance of winning a general election.
No, he's done. It's over. And this is why, going back to Purdue and Loeffler, I got to show people Walker's lead over Warnock. And I
If the
was
establishment was
stunned.
smart, they would just
Excuse me.
replace him.
Right. Just get rid of him at this point.
Tell him to step down, give him a big cash gig,
Yep.
a sort of temporary, and stick someone.
Send him on his
Now,
way.
if there's talk of Purdue running, then that's what's afoot. It's because Purdue's not going to run against Kemp. Purdue's running
They'll
if
get
Kemp
rid of
steps
him.
down.
Yeah, I agree. You're right. They'll just get rid of him. And I do see some people saying it's small. I know it is. I'll try to zoom in.
Wouldn't even stop trading in stock after it became very controversial for him to do so. I mean, the guy's pitiful.
Completely brain dead. Or not even tone deaf.
Well,
yeah.
How I describe Sonny Perdue is the whole family. Boss hog without the brains.
Here is Walker versus Warnock. And for those who remember Robert and I going over the Georgia polling before the election, I was like, look, they're going to lose. I hate to tell you guys, they're going to lose. We'll get to the Republican areas, the Trumplican areas that they struggled in. Walker leads in the North, Robert, where there are more moderate Republicans. He leads 53.3 to 29.4. In the Atlanta burbs, he leads by about 46 to 44.5. Of course, he's getting crushed in the metro. 58.2 for Warnock, which is actually kind of weak, to 29.4 for Walker, which is not that bad, but he's still getting crushed. Here's the main thing. In central Georgia, 51.4 Walker, 33.8 Warnock. In the coastal South, and remember in that region you have Savannah, Walker, 48.5 to Warnock, 35.4. The last two specifically, Robert, that's everything Purdue and Loeffler couldn't do, man.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I mean, Walker sells well. I mean, they'll take lots of personal shots and go through every controversial aspect of his biography, but he's too much of an icon in the state. I don't see it. All you need in Georgia is someone that doesn't too badly rattle the suburbs, but more importantly, appeals to the populist rural parts of the state. And
let
Walker
me bring that up
precisely.
And let me bring up what Robert just said. Here's by area, even though we did just show you the ATL burbs. Here's by area. The suburbs are about tied at 44. It's not really statistically.
That's all you need. You just need to not lose by double digits.
And then crush it in the rural area. Look at rural Georgia, man. 63 to 22. Holy crap. That's over. I mean, Robert, he's going to win that race.
If you do better you win the rural areas more than you lose the urban areas, which is what's going to happen with Herschel. Because he'll do better than average amongst black voters because he's been an icon a long time.
He's already in double digits. He's already in double.
Kind of good that Republicans lost that seat because Walker's an improvement going forward compared to either Loeffler or Purdue.
For the party's image, you mean? Right?
Party's image, but also just a better vote in the Senate. I mean, Loeffler and Purdue are wastes of space. I mean, look at Loeffler. She at the very end. We said from the very beginning, the runoff is the recount is the runoff. Tried to tell everybody there that the Georgia people wouldn't listen, just ignored it. We're trying to undermine the runoff and the recount, or undermine the recount the whole time, thinking it was a hurdle and a problem for the runoff when it was the other way around. Totally. Loeffler waited till the very last minute to say she would even vote. I mean, my pitch in a whole bunch of our pitches down there at the time was run on making the January 6th vote. You're not going to vote for certification of the election unless certain election standards are met in terms of audits and whatnot prior to that date. I mean, that was it. You didn't even have to commit to voting against the Biden slate. You just had to commit to these preconditions need to be met before I can say we can honestly certify this election result.
Right.
They refused to until the very end. Loeffler jumped on board, said, I will vote against certification the night before to try to salvage her failing her career. And then what did she do after January 6th? She capitulated and reversed course. Said, I just can't do it in good conscience. I mean, these people are a disgrace. They're just a disgrace. And the old Republican money country club establishment has never been liked in Georgia, ever. And the Purdue machine got in because they pretended to be good old boys.
Yeah.
And they're only good old boys in their Democratic style corruption. That's the only way they were good old boys. And the party needs to purge itself of both the suburban never Trump establishment crowd with Ratburger,
Bratty Burger,
crew, and needs to get away from the old money Purdue folks, who everybody recognized for the corruption that they are. And they needed populist candidates, and only because Loeffler and Purdue lost is Herschel Walker able to be a potential senator, and that's more of the populist. The real animus of the Republican base in Georgia is now a populist base. It's just not popular in the suburbs. The idea that it will ever be popular again in the suburbs is missing the boat of who has moved to those suburbs, of how the suburbs are trending. You just need to not get crushed in the suburbs.
Yep.
In other words, like Marjorie Taylor Greene would get killed because she's too unpopular in the suburbs. She would do great in rural areas, maybe even better than Herschel would do, but she would get crushed in the urban suburban vote. You need someone like Walker who appeals to the rural populist base without too rattling the suburban base. And there's a way to meet that. He's a perfect combination for that. But he'll be a much better vote in the United States Senate than either Loeffler or Purdue ever were.
Yeah, I really couldn't agree more. I mean, that's really what it comes down to. And Purdue and Loeffler were trying to placate the ATL burbs, and they did it at the expense of that rural vote. And it's more because you know this. You understand ancestral voting. That area of the state was Carter country. It's the more southern Democrat area.
Democratic, just 10 years ago.
Just 10 years ago. And those people are Trumpian Republicans now. And without, you have to walk the line. Like you just said, you really have to, toe the line to make sure you don't scare the hell out of the burbs. But he's not doing that. He's got the ATL burbs just about tied. He's got about almost a 2-point lead in it. And overall, the burbs are tied at 44. So, I mean, that's all you have to do, Robert, especially if you're going to win 2/3 of the damn rural vote, at least, which he's going to do.
And Warnock has really done nothing impressive since getting in. It's not, he hasn't managed things like, I mean, he's basically been a reliable liberal Democratic vote. He hasn't done what Sinema has smartly done.
Very wise.
In terms of, becoming this block vote on a lot of stuff, becoming the person, the hurdle, trying to remake herself into Goldwater and McCain. Independent style politics in Arizona. If Warnock had been smart, he would have tried to, especially given his liberal protege, his liberal history, his pedigree, but he hasn't done that at all. Nor has he done anything like AOC significant to get the attention, to get the real enthusiastic passion of the Democratic base either. He's been mostly invisible.
Yep. And you brought up two things I got to ask you about. But first, I don't want to waste too much time on this audit. I was reading it and I texted you that when I was reading it. I mean, they got scammed, man. It was $1 million scam. I mean, I really, not that I'm like, hitting on Cyber Ninja. The fact of the matter is that was not where the problem was. And you know it, I know it. And now they're going to use that $1 million report to beat on people like Matt Braynard. Did you know they already used that report to delete Matt Braynard's testimony before the committee?
I wasn't aware of that.
On YouTube. Because they're totally different.
Right,
man.
because it's different than his report.
Yeah, it's like having a CPA go through your tax return and, making sure you took this deduction, where's the receipt, kind of thing. But they're not actually going to see whether or not you bought that and the receipt is bogus. You know what I mean? It's totally different. It's a multi-pronged approach, I guess, is where I'm going. That what they did is probably necessary. And the media is lying about what that report says. The report is not saying all was well and Joe Biden won by a bigger margin. That is not, just for people who didn't read it on their own, there are serious problems. Tens of thousands of ghost votes.
Over 50. Well, my favorite part, what the report was never going to confirm, which we told people from the get-go, was that there was a problem with machine counting. There wasn't a problem with machine counting. And you explain that from the very inception, that, the Sidney Powell stuff. Sidney's out pitching some other crazy nonsense today. It's just, her insanity just keeps going.
No.
And then Lynn Wood's insanity and all the rest. That part of it was never going to go anywhere. Where the audit could do some good was in documenting some of the over 57,000 ballots being cast by in a questionable manner, piggybacking off of the work that you had done and Matt Braynard had done. I agree that there's aspects they could have and should have gone into in greater detail. Our biggest complaint all along was that the signature match check was the most important thing to do, and they ultimately agreed not to do that.
They didn't, right?
For various reasons. But the part they did do, and this confirms what we were saying all along. The part of the signature match check they checked was whether or not the election officials accurately caught signatures that were scribbles or flat lines or blank. And it turned out they missed about 80% of them. And there was 80% that ballots that had no signature at all, many of them were considered valid votes, mail-in votes.
Or
but
all
my
caps.
favorite one
all
was
caps.
all the signatures with just a flat line. It's not even a scribble. It's just a flat.
And you know
line.
why they do that, Robert? They do it because they don't even want anybody to be able to see whose handwriting that is. They don't want to put a damn letter to the paper.
That's so obvious. It's not like they put in an X and pretended to be illiterate. They did a flat line, and they called that imagine. This is what I told Trump from the get-go and Trump's people. I was like, imagine the visual effect when we get some signature matches that everybody can look at and be like, what the heck? That was counted as a valid vote? I was like, that would win in the court of public opinion that could then change minds in Congress and courts. And this shows how glaring that always was, that just that little subsample they did in Arizona, finding that a whole bunch of ballots, thousands of ballots were counted as valid that had a flat line in the signature mark.
And we found some with and this multiple states, all caps.
Yes.
All caps, lots of them, man.
Yes.
Just like, and I do that sometimes. I write in all caps sometimes, but I would never do it when I'm signing for my ballot. Again,
they
wouldn't even allow me in Florida.
Standards that apply to petitions.
That's right.
If it's not a good enough signature to get someone on the ballot, by golly, it's definitely not a good enough signature to get someone in actual office.
Yep. And moving forward, the public is fully on the side of more strict election reforms in Georgia. We asked about that multiple times leading up to the runoffs. We did it again because the CD media wanted a bunch of election reform also to add whether or not people wanted a full forensic audit. 60% wanted a full forensic audit in Georgia. 60%. And a lot of Democrats, which surprised me, a lot of Democrats did too. And they just flatly said, Robert, the theme was clear. Look, if we want it, then we want it, and we should do it. That is what the voter said.
Well, few people outside of your hardcore partisans in a particular election don't support audits of their own elections.
It's crazy.
There's just no good grounds to do so.
Yeah, and with signature verification, photo ID, that's damn near 80%. Strict signature verification match is in the 70s. Bans on ballot harvesting, almost 60%. Bans on drop boxes, almost 60%. What surprised me too is the percentage. It's overwhelming. They don't want ballots that arrive after election day to be counted or that turn up. They don't even care if they're valid. They're like, at this point, no. There's just because there's really no good reason for them not to have, those ballots in hand outside of, late arriving military ballots or something. People are not okay with it. They want a total on election day. Doesn't mean they have to have a margin. They want a total. It's just Republicans in Georgia completely caved, man. And the overall electorate was good with it.
To the credit of the Arizona audit, they did come up with very good legislative reform proposals. There's a few more that I would have recommended, but they have 8 or 10 really good legislative reforms that would dramatically improve the quality of elections in Arizona, and hopefully that happens. The Republican-controlled legislature, Republican governor, there's no reason for them not to pass those legislative reforms over the next several months leading up to 2022.
Yeah, look at election day deadlines. It's just how strongly support 43, support 27, less than 2 in 10 oppose it. This is who they cave to, Robert. This is, it's just crazy with the idea of poll watchers. You remember that lawsuit and all of that? No meaningful in Pennsylvania and Georgia, 6 feet away nonsense. Look at it again, close, right? So they want both parties present. Bottom line. 43% strongly support, 28.6 support. 15.5% oppose having, people, third-party people that can observe the counting of votes. That's it.
Oh, yeah. And they're also for real cameras that can film everything. one good provision, like Arizona is talking about making it law, that since they make all the ballots digital, and are supposed to make the ballot return envelopes digital for signature purposes, that information should, as a matter of law, be required to be made public soon after the election, within days after the election. Because they found many ballots in Georgia that had questions and problems on it, many ballots that had been counted as valid. Obviously, that took place here in Arizona. The only utility to having machines involved in elections at all, in my view, is is publicizing digitized ballots and ballot access forms to make everybody. And then you add filming. There should be filming of everything all the way through with close enough filming so you can see what they're doing. You could make everybody into a public election observer at any time. In other words, they could be live or they could look at it after the fact. And that's what should happen. And overwhelmingly, what the opinion polling supports is the same thing we've seen around the world, which is transparency in elections is always popular.
Right.
Covering stuff up is always unpopular. What those Atlanta people did with bringing those boxes out, what they did with covering up the polling windows in Philadelphia, that will be memorable for forever.
Yeah.
And now you add to it absentee ballots that were accepted with either a blank signature line or just a line for a signature. That is not the sign of an election you can have confidence in.
And then they have the nerve a couple months later to shout across the pond at Putin again. This is recent, folks. Recent.
Yes,
it's crazy.
The Russian elections, but what was even particular? Yeah, that's a good probably bridge into some of the foreign elections, because we've had 3 foreign elections since we were last on. Russia, Germany, and Canada. In Russia, Putin's party managed to maintain. What was fascinating was 2 things. One, there's all that nonsense over that guy that's basically a CIA plant.
Right. Come on.
He got nowhere at all. There's just no popularity for the guy. There never has been. What was fascinating was who the EU establishment in the West was pushing, in particular in the UK, somewhat in the State Department in the US. They were trying to get the commies to do well, which it should be a reminder to everybody who is number 2 and number 3. Who are the alternatives to Putin in Russia? If you don't like Putin, just remember who the alternatives are in Russia. The alternatives are, number 1, the communists, who are actually being backed by the EU and the State Department this time. And number 2 is Zhirinovsky and his ultra-nationalist. Zhirinovsky's an interesting character. There's populist traits to him, but he's also kind of a nut. He once did a campaign ad.
Yeah, that's hype. That's hyper.
In the shower.
That's hyper nationalism. That's real hyper nationalism. We hear the left all the time over here. They just hate that word national. It's a dirty word to them because the literature shows, really, the academia shows, even their own, Tom Narn, that nationalism is their enemy. They will never get the leftist utopia that they want so long as nationalism exists. And that was the conclusion of the 20th century communist.
What it's a reminder of is that Putin is a restraint on the imperial ambitions of the Russian population, not in a proponent of it. In other words, to the degree that people see him as a strong man, to the degree they see him as intervening in his neighbors' policies and whatnot, understand that is the least interventionist available political option in Russia, because the other alternatives are communist and ultra-nationalists who would like the Soviet Union to be back. So that these are not, viable alternative. There is no, State Department style alternative. Their guy Navalny got nowhere. Again, he's never been liked in Russia. He still isn't liked in Russia. But also what it showed was Putin's party. Well, it's not it's the party that supports Putin. He's not a member of it.
It's not really. It's his alliance.
Russia. They were on the verge of not having their supermajority enough to do whatever they want legislatively. And so what Putin did a couple of weeks before the election was come out and oppose vaccine mandates and say no vaccine mandates are going to happen in Russia. That one act boosted the party so that they got their supermajority support. Whereas you look at Canada and you look at Germany, Merkel's party got the lowest vote apparently in history.
Ever for her. Yeah.
Since it was formed in the CDU, since it was formed in 1946. The Greens, who really should just call them, the modern day lefty Nazis, really. In terms of their mindset, they were supposed to, they were surging. They thought they were going to do great. They they did well, but they dropped down to being just a marginal third party.
It was better than they had done, but less than they had hoped and anticipated.
Absolutely. At one point, they were leading. They looked like they were going to be the lead, and they wanted more, not only more crazy environmental policies, more crazy COVID policies, but deeply anti-Russia policies. It turned out those were not as popular as they thought they were. What people were doing when they were surging was looking for an alternative because of their dissatisfaction with Merkel over the last 4 years. And the AfD, while its overall nationwide voting went down, it decided that was because it chose a different strategy. In Germany, they split their parliament seats. Half the parliament seats are by winning first past the post, the local district based. You got to be number one in your district to win. But half the seats are proportional based on your total nationwide vote. They decided to focus on their strongholds, and they won more seats because they ended up winning. They were first in a bunch of areas in traditional Eastern Germany.
That's a good way to put it. So because of the way their elections are conducted, they figured, you know what, drive up the numbers where we can drive them up. And it was a different strategy. Some people would say, well, doesn't that kind of balkanize? Look, they are balkanized. What the hell is the point?
Yeah, parliamentary system. Yeah,
despite all of the, look, Viva joins the PCC, runs in a really liberal riding. This party gets smeared. You think Trump gets it. Don't get me wrong. And Trump got it. People who are Trumplican, they get it. But this is like Canada's version of everyone has an extreme right scapegoat. And that's that party. They with everything, they still nearly tripled their vote, Robert.
Yes. Yeah. And they hit a 5% ratio that has a bunch of campaign finance reimbursements, certain campaign standing. It triggered a whole bunch of protections. And it exceeded, the odds that I put out was to take the PPC to do better than the odds, which was 3.7%. And the PPC ended up doing better than 5%. So they easily crossed that threshold. So people who took that bet in Canada made money. You could bet on it in Canada and parts of the UK.
They got 800,000 votes, man.
I think 4 times. I think they got under 200,000 initially last week.
Last, I saw one column, and I did tweet it out because I tweeted it out because it was your very typical left wing. What's the word I'm looking? Dismissive. You're very well, this should all concern us, but it's because they needed a place for their anti-vaxxers, and you don't get that many votes in Canada on an anti-vax movement. It's just so stupid, Robert.
That was a protest movement about all the COVID interventions.
Yeah.
Large. That's what PPC rode from 1.5% to 5%.
That's right.
And if they were considered viable, they would have got double digits. There were a bunch of places where people wanted to vote for them, but decided not to. There was always talk by conservatives that they lost votes to the PPC. That's partially true, but they didn't lose votes to the PPC. They lost votes because they ran on a neoliberal.
They lost that they suck.
Right. They ran a terrible campaign.
Yes.
And they deserved to lose votes. The reality is they would have lost a lot more votes if people voted who they really liked the most rather than who they thought could win in their district and what they call their riding there.
You gotta give some credit though to Viva for this. He made a huge contribution to the image of the PPC, Robert.
Oh, no doubt. He was the most popular person other than Bernier himself.
Media
coverage and media interpretation and public representation, and did quite well in his own writing. I think he was distressed by the fact that Canada is as nuts as it is.
Yeah.
And that not enough people are protesting against it. Like in Australia, where you got up to 3/4 of the population happy to be a penal colony.
It's always too damn late by the time they wake up, and they wind up running from the police, getting shot in their back. What a bunch of chumps. Yeah, I'm serious.
It's unbelievable.
From Crocodile Dundee to total
There is a
turd.
common denominator in all three of those elections: Russia, Canada, and Germany.
Yeah.
The pro-COVID parties underperformed.
That's right.
The big public health, because Merkel was, big, was the front of that, face of that. She got the worst performance ever. The media tried to spin it as, center left wins, that's because that was the only practical alternative. The AfD did very well where they did. The libertarian-leaning party did better than they've ever done. The actual overall vote split between left and right actually didn't shift much in Germany. It was just Merkel was the face of EU-style politics and public health interventions under COVID, so her party took the biggest hit. The same is in Russia. Putin wisely jumped on the anti-vax mandate platform, made sure his party maintained supermajority status despite economic issues in Russia currently. And then in Canada, the only reason Trudeau called this election is he didn't want a minority government anymore.
Yeah.
He got the same minority government all over again.
His gamble did not pay off. I don't know what the headlines I was reading was just like, are you aware of what are you guys aware of? And by the way, he thought when he made that call, it was almost, Canada is not Great Britain, but it was almost a Cameron-like mistake. I mean, it really was. He thought he was going to sail to it when he, when he made that decision.
And their polling was way up. And what it shows is, and they decided to make vaccine passports centerpiece of their campaign, and it didn't work. It backfired, which what is they're doing bad polling. That's what that tells me. Not only are they misreading the electorate in general, that, it surprises them, but they're doing bad polling, because my guess is their polling showed vaccine passports really popular because of how they were phrasing the question.
Yeah, and also who they're reaching, Robert. Also who they're reaching. It's like the same problem. You look at Fox News, they suck. Their poll is horrible. But it's like, what makes that poll horrible? It's wording for sure, the ordering of questions. But Fox is really notorious for exacerbating the problem that you and I always discuss. Everybody does it. The New York Times, Monmouth. Who are they talking to? Is it, do you think you really do have a good regional representation? Or when you look and you drill down, how many self-identified Republicans are in metro areas, for instance? I mean, guys, it really does get that granular. I will keep going if I'm dissatisfied. If I think that there's just like too many Bill Kristol Republicans, and they'll give you hints, nationally, whatever it may be. Do you have a 22% Protestant sample? I mean, you did something wrong. These are the things I can't believe they don't look at, Robert. It's ethnicity beyond the typical ethnicities.
I think it's twofold. One is, as we've talked about now for years, polling has become much more difficult. Part science. And unless you really know what you're doing, you're likely to get it wrong. And then the second aspect is the bias of the pollsters themselves.
Yeah, they want it to be like that.
When they see they tend to oversample their own constituency and their own community, professional class, urban younger voters. And so when they get results that they like, that they want to see, they pretend those results are accurate or representative when they're not.
28% conservative. Or what the hell is wrong with it? The country's like 36 to 40, depending on what cycle it is. You come up with numbers like that, Robert, this alarm bell's got to go off in your head. It's got to. And we know some people are immediately, Biden's approval can't be that bad in Georgia. It is that bad. And if you're looking, if you know what you're doing and you didn't make these mistakes, in January 5th was another good test for pollsters in Georgia. A lot of people sat it out, but we know what the 2020 vote record is here. So I can look at it and I can say, you know what? It's about even. This is dead on. I know it is.
Another good example of that is the California recall. Our original instincts, we were right when we advised people many months before the recall election was finalized that the best way to take out Newsom was to find a Democrat who had had Tulsi Gabbard or Bobby Kennedy type positions on issues related, at least the lockdowns and some issues. In other words, you could get a better Democrat than Newsom. You weren't going to get a likely Republican alternative. And that analysis turned out to be absolutely accurate.
Yeah, I think a lot of people feel that was their last election in that state, Robert. I mean, we spoke to a lot of people. I just can't live here anymore.
It's going to be a huge hurdle for a Republican. And there was a window of opportunity
There was. They
because there
blew it.
was enough Democrats that really didn't like Newsom and that had doubts about public health interventions. But the problem was, I mean, ultimately Newsom's gamble worked. When it became either Newsom or a Republican,
That's
the
right.
partisan bias of the state rallied to him.
Yeah.
And the media helped a lot with that, of course.
Yeah, absolutely.
And
And
the
that's
money
another
thing.
thing with what you were saying before with the other elections. If you're happy with those results when you have the entire game rigged in your favor, I mean, it is every hall of power, every information channel. I mean, give me a break,
Well,
and that's all you can do.
Not only that, the coloration is interesting and is, I think, reflective of where Biden is going to.
Yeah, let me
That
show that.
he
Go
did a
ahead.
little bit worse than Newsom did a little bit worse than what than he did in the last time he had been in 2018. But but what was interesting is where he did worse. So he did better.
CA-16, baby.
He actually did better in upscale white liberal areas. Even exceeded Biden's vote in upscale white liberal coastal areas.
Right.
He did worse in almost every ethnic and working class area in the state than he did before, and then Biden had done in 2020. And so what you're going to see is the Biden support is solidifying in upscale white liberal professional class areas, the real constituency he's been representing while he's been in the office, in the Oval Office.
Right.
Amongst everybody else, particularly working class communities that lean Democrat, and a lot of your ordinary middle-minded, moderate, suburban, middle America voter, he's failing and failing badly. Because he did, I mean, the implicit promise for that voter was there'll be no more controversy and COVID will be solved.
That's right.
That was the implicit promise to those.
The steady hand, man. The steady hand. He was going to stop the boat from rocking, and the seasick voter could catch a breath for a minute. That was the deal. And it's not working out.
Afghanistan, we got vaccine mandates. We got, I mean, nothing's been cured with COVID politically at all. The restrictions are getting more onerous rather than less. The economy's not rebounding. I mean, we're starting to look like we got I think you have your economy confidence index.
I do. Yeah.
Because you look at that. I mean, it's starting to look like Obama economy part 2. I mean, it's like somehow Biden gets in and he magically returns Obama's lethargic economy. Even real estate, which was temporarily keeping everything afloat in certain respects, is starting to sink back. I know that because I get people that send me, I have these companies that send me valuations on my own house.
Yeah, me too.
and it's down 10% over the last month. So it was way up a couple months ago, but now it's starting to decline the other ways. And you're seeing a lot of people that I think we had, for the first time since Obama tenure, we had a surge in poverty and a decline in median income. That had not happened during the Trump era, period. Those combined stats. But now they're back. It wasn't supposed to be back. The economy was supposed to be booming. And take people through the confidence index.
Yeah, so we started this, that basically we asked, just like the Consumer Conference Board conducted by Nielsen, only we do it of registered voters, because there is some predictive value, but who cares about all adults, right, Robert? We're looking at registered voters here. And under Donald Trump, the equivalent would have been, around this last month, would have been about a 90. And when it started with Biden, it was low. It ticked up a little bit for a while. But then last month, this index is designed not to be volatile. Okay. It's a relative value. It's really these 3 indexes you see here, the dotted lines, one's the present situation and one is the 6-month outlook. And then the solid gold is the overall main index. And they are averages of relative values. And we ask people to assign either a positive, neutral, or negative view of each of these conditions, whether it's current business conditions, current employment conditions. Those 2 make up the present situation index. And then you have the future for those 2. What do you think about 6 months from now? And then the third future, which is total family income. What do you expect it to be? Are you positive, neutral, or negative about it? And we saw a 10-point decline last month. And then this month, I was wondering, there was yet another, injection into people's accounts. I was wondering if we would see a tick up, and we didn't, not outside the margin of error anyway. The current business condition was 44.8 last month, which dived from low 50s in June. that is not really, again, like I said, it's not supposed to happen. It's not supposed to be that volatile. And this month, it's only 45.8. Current employment, 42.2, down from almost 50. Now it's only 44. 51.4 to 53.9 for expected business conditions. So what I'm seeing, and let me just give people the rest, but employment 55, that's up just 0.8 of a percentage point, and expected total family income didn't really budge at all. 50.2 last month, 50.5 this month. So then you take those relative values, you average them by how many sub-index levels you have, and that's what the main index level comes to. Same thing as the Consumer Conference Board. Bottom line is that there are two things I'm noticing. The neutral, Robert, is going away. So this inflated number of how many people will tell you it's neutral, because it's a relative value, you can have a lot more people either give you positive and negatives, a lot less neutral, and the index doesn't move all that much. It's hard for people to understand unless I, kind of write it or spell it out for them. But the bottom line is this month, more people told us they were positive, but more people also told us they were negative. So what does that mean? People want to feel good about the future, and they've been kind of holding their judgment on Biden. They've always told us that currently things are not good, but maybe 6 months from now, they'll be better. This month, this is the month where that neutral, I'm going to reserve judgment attitude collapsed. So now they have rendered a judgment on how they think things are going to be under Joe Biden, and it's not good. Those feelings are hardening, and they're hardening in a negative view, in a negative light. So again, I think that's number one. And then number two, you have the Reuters Ipsos poll. I don't have a graphic for it, but that negative reverse trend for Biden on COVID, that's it. That's game over for him, folks. He had nothing else. And people were telling us, you know what, I'll give him a chance, because that's how Americans are. And now they're over it, man. They're over it. And that's so freaking sad, because 8 months ago, 80% felt good about the future of their family income. Now it's barely over 50 in relative value. Everywhere else is negative territory. It says recession. That's what it says, recession.
Yeah, and the analysis that we could somehow go through this experiment, really a modern monetary theory experiment, infused ideas. That we could just shut everything down and write checks out of thin air, and that would magically solve everything, never really made a lot of sense. I'm sure they'll probably compromise before they shut down the government in terms of the debt. The Fed will bring enough pressure, and Wall Street will bring enough pressure for them to balance that out. But there's a lot of keys and indicators that the stock market will go in the wrong direction over the next several years in terms of where it's been. That there were a lot of expectations baked into the market as well, that there was this boom coming. It was right around the corner because this was all going to work. And there was no real reason to believe that. Many of the small businesses that are the engine of economic job growth especially are never coming back. I mean, you have a certain number of businesses that could not survive this kind of shutdown. And the courts, unfortunately, have not forced insurance companies to compensate for them. They've found ways to let the insurance companies out of their contracts. And while, I look at that from a legal perspective, it has a massive economic impact, because if those insurance companies were forced to redistribute wealth, when basically it's from Wall Street to Main Street is what that is really. When that doesn't happen, Wall Street gets to, keep their cash, and the billionaires and the digital, .com billionaires will continue to do very well. But the ordinary mom and pop, it isn't Amazon that creates that many jobs. It isn't Google that creates that many jobs. It isn't Apple.
That's right. They might create
jobs in like Singapore. They might create jobs in over there, but they're not creating major jobs in America. And whereas it's your mom and pop shop running a storefront on the local Main Street that creates jobs, and a lot of them were wiped out in ways that was permanent because of the way that they couldn't survive a year and a half. Many of them didn't receive much in aid. They received a little bit of paycheck protection, not much. That money was being diverted to places like Planned Parenthood and big banks instead, who truly did not need it. Yeah. And then a lot of the money that went out to ordinary people, they reinvested in the stock market in ways that, you had a lot of retail traders that are way in over their head. a lot of TikTokers who suddenly think they're stock day traders. I don't know how many people I've met random like Uber drivers who are like, yeah, I thought about not coming back to work because I had the unemployment thing, and I was becoming a good day trader. And I was like, that's not a story that usually ends well.
Yep.
So
I remember many of those. Even that has always been the case. But then they gave them like you said, it was like this experiment where you coddled and kind of encouraged people to think like that.
Stay at home, play games, stream, buy from Amazon, and pretend you're a day trader.
Yep.
And that's not usually a recipe for long-term economic success.
So you think that's a good point. So you think too, though, that 6 months ago, talking to some of these people, Robert, they may have thought, you know what, let's see how it is. These businesses are gone. These positions are out. The situation is done. But maybe 6 months from now, there'll be a revamping. I've seen it before. It happened under Trump. He brought back whole industries that were supposed to be gone forever. Barack Obama said brick and mortar retail was dead. And it wasn't his fault. That's just the way of the world. And then lo and behold, Donald Trump sends retail sales without an inflated proportion of internet sales. He sends brick and mortars back to high numbers, historical numbers. Same thing with manufacturing and other goods producing. Now, though, you think they're just realizing that this is not going to be that kind of situation.
Yeah, I think that's part of the story. I think and then you compound that with the fact that if these employer mandates really go through, you're talking about, even in the most pro-vaccine work environments, you're seeing at least 10% of the workforce rather lose their job than take the vaccine.
Yeah, we just saw 350.
A quarter of the workforce, depending on where you're at in the country and the kind of job it is. Like, is Tyson Foods really going to lay off 20% of its workforce? Where are they going to get the replacement for that?
Regional
how much
healthcare
training cost are they going to put in?
Regional healthcare, that's how, for people who don't know, that's how it works.
ER units,
350
OR
people,
units, other
gone.
units, they're having to shut down because they can't do it. Same thing, it's happening in Alaska right now. It's happening in different parts of New York. There's huge wings of hospitals having to shut down because they decided to fire their workers rather than, even people who had natural immunity already, fire those workers rather than come to some reasonable accommodation. So, where do they think that's going to go? And then the state of New York and some of these big states, liberal states, are saying they're going to deny them unemployment compensation. How do you think that's going to work ultimately? Where do you think that goes? So you're going to double unemployment overnight? How do you think that's going to rebound economically?
They're going to take a wrecking ball they've already, with the shutdown, they are going to take a wrecking ball to this economy. And by the way, what does that mean for all of these numbers, which is a good way to segue into the Gallup? We were talking last week with yet another doctor in Florida in the area where we were speaking to some other ones about how they're coming up with these numbers. I'm looking at the hospitalization trends. There's no damn overburdening of the hospitals. What are they talking about? And talking to people at North Florida and at Malcolm Randall, they laid it out for me. So it's a gimmick. So let's say in Malcolm Randall devotes 3 beds in their emergency area or whatever it is to COVID, and all 3 beds are taken. It doesn't matter if they have 97 others open. Those 3 beds that were designated for COVID are now taken. So guess what? That hospital is 100% capacity for COVID. All right. So it's a gimmick. And then how did they determine how many beds they're going to allocate for COVID? Staffing. So to get rid of these people, I just heard Laura repeating in the other room, to get rid of these people because they don't want to take a vaccine, Robert, is going to further inflate this scam that we keep hearing from Joe Biden and others. Because if you look at the CDC tracker, it's not there. And while I get your response, I can actually find that, pull it up. But comparing the nation overall to California, they are not making up, highly vaccinated. They are not making a positive contribution to that trend. And in fact, while the entire nation had just 1 spike this year, they had 2. So what the hell, man?
And what you see is 2 things. It's medical misinformation that has led to popular misconceptions, such that Democrats believe, almost half of Democrats believe that there is a very high chance, anywhere from a third.
Oh, let's show it.
Here it is. So here you have, this is what Democrats think will happen to you if you get COVID and you don't have the vaccine. Over 40% of them think you're going right to the hospital. Over half think there's at least a 30% chance you're going right. 30% of you are going to go to the hospital. I mean, only 2% get it right because that number is under 1%. 98% of Democrats overstate the risk of COVID hospitalization for the unvaccinated population. And even, Republicans are not nearly as bad as Democrats, but there's still almost half of Republicans think there's a better than 10% chance that you're going to be hospitalized if you're unvaccinated and get COVID. They're wrong. It's under 1%. Gallup admits in its own article there's less than 1% chance of any of this happening. And yet almost overwhelmingly, especially amongst Democrats, when people wonder, why are they so panicky? Why are they so obsessed? Now, for some of them, it's purely a political power grab for some people. But for your ordinary Democrat, it's because they really think you're going to die if you don't get vaccinated from COVID. That's what they really think. And it's absurd. And it's based on a complete the media accuses everybody else of disinformation. It's the media misinformation that created this fake.
Are you listening, YouTube? Are you listening, YouTube, by the way, for giving people all these medical misinformation strikes and taking their pages down? And here's the CDC's own data to back that up, by the way. There is no crisis of overburdening in the hospital system right now. None. Look at it, Robert. This is the entire pandemic. The left is the nation. The right is California. You can see where the nation had one spike. California had two. That preceded the nation overall, and that was actually slightly after the nation started to do better overall. So what the hell explains that, man? What explains that?
What's also amazing is how parallel those charts are. Yeah. So far there's been no evidence that any public health intervention has changed the results. We've had experiments all around the world and throughout the United States, and even comparable reason. If you factor out seasonality, you factor out weather, you factor out demographics, you find that there's basically no difference anywhere. Nope. It doesn't matter if there's high vaccination rates or low vaccination rates, high mask mandates or low mask mandates, big lockdown orders, low lockdown orders, same outcome. It turns out a virus acts like a virus.
Yep.
In these extraordinary public health interventions, which we have never utilized before in history, there's never been mask mandates. It's been limited. It's usually a certain jurisdiction for a limited period of time, limited locations. We've never done it globally. We've never done vaccine mandates on this scale ever before. The only vaccine mandate ever went up to the Supreme Court was a limited one for one community experiencing an epidemic of a very dangerous virus for a vaccine that had over a century of safety and efficacy behind it. And then it only said you paid the equivalent of $100 fine if you didn't take it. That was it. There's never been being able to be fired, losing access to schools, losing access to healthcare, losing access to housing. None of these things, being put in separate camps like it's an X-Files FEMA show. This kind of dynamic like we're seeing in Australia, this sort of, and now they're tying it in. So
slap the Jewish star on people, man. That's what they're doing. This is Biden's the first speech when Biden came out, announced this. That was the most terrifying speech I've ever heard a U.S. president give. Terrifying in the sense that 8 people looked at that draft and nobody saw the parallel to, it sounded like eugenics, man. It sounded like eugenics and Nazism. It did. And I'm not hyperbolic. You know that.
Any statement that's being made right now and substitute the word HIV positive for unvaccinated.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Because it's what we went through before, but on a much smaller scale. We were so morally horrified by it that we made movies like Philadelphia Oscar winners.
Right.
We passed the Americans with Disabilities Act so that it would never happen again. And here we are, full scale, nonstop, full stop. We're talking about 20% of SEALs being out of the military over this.
Yeah,
that's insane. That's $1 billion worth of research and training and cost to try to replace that many.
And we had problems with pilots over here by me. This is they're grounding.
That colonel put that information out. That military doctor filed a declaration under penalty of perjury. I mean, look, for pilots, there's always a very high risk of blood clotting for a range of reasons by what they do. That's one of the known risks of this vaccine.
Yep.
So, I mean, and so why are we forcing this on this? I mean, they originally said 50% vaccination was good. Then they said 60.
That was herd immunity. That was it, to achieve herd immunity, 50,
Exactly.
60%.
We're at over 90%. Like the other useful stat that Justin Hart, was if you look at who it is that it has discomfort with the vaccine, they fit two groups. One, people that come from communities with a history of suffering governmental experimentation in the medical arena. African Americans, Native Americans, working class whites in rural Appalachia and other places like that. They have a historical knowledge of eugenics and forced sterilization, stories from grandparents and great-grandparents and so forth. The second group is just the group that is at low risk from the virus.
Yeah,
and it's
that's
the media's trying to hide this. It's only these crazy Trumpers that are no, it isn't.
Total
Andrew
nonsense.
Wiggins is not a crazy Trumper. Kyrie Irving, the NBA star, is not a crazy Trumper. Cardi B is not a crazy Trumper.
Cardi B, look what they did to that woman. Look what they did to that woman. And all she did, and by the way, just to before I'll forget, the same people who now want to deny the unvaccinated healthcare are the same people that we just, what is it? It's 2021, about to be 2022. So 12 years now. These are the same people for 12 years who told us that healthcare is a right, man. You can't deny anybody for anything. So, the doctor is not entitled to his own labor, that's his product, that's his labor, that's his profession. He's not entitled to, to do what he wants with that, or to charge with that, or be compensated fairly for that, because it's a right. So we're supposed to just force them to do it. And yet here we are with these people who think that, the unvaccinated should just be left to die in the street. Here's the thing. When we were pulling that CDC hospitalization chart, I went and looked at Florida, which is almost totally under control again. It always, we all have the same trends. Like you said, it's very, it's very striking how you can really find generally the same trend just about anywhere, no matter what people did. But some people do better than others. And in Florida, where it's a higher, older population, you would think they would have the worst of it than, some other places like California. And in fact, that's not true. Just like the year prior, Florida is always ahead of the curve and ahead of California. 23% drop last week, and California is still struggling to push their trend along. This has always been a pandemic of the elderly, Robert. The elderly and the unhealthy. And it is so clear in these numbers.
Who's taken the vaccine? Over 90%.
Well, that's why I think Florida actually does outperform them.
I mean, those groups, there's the people who look at the risk ratio and see the virus is more risky to them than the unknown aspects of the vaccine.
So they take the antibodies.
Yeah. The people who are not taking it are very young people, particularly from communities that know you can't trust the government on this kind of stuff. But otherwise, it's just the profile of people who look at this and say, I have more risk from the unknowns of the vaccine than I do from the knowns of the virus. I mean, that's they're just doing a simple mathematical assessment. And it's absurd that, Biden out 97, 98%. I mean, this is of groups that are very low risk.
I'm going to take a risk here by showing this, but you're nailing it. And what we found, and the weekend we were doing this, I sent it to you. I texted it to you. I'm like, holy crap, Robert, I cannot believe that we're finding numbers like these. I really did expect very tiny numbers for severe adverse effects by age and gender and race. That is what jumped right out at me. If you're a minority, if you're a woman who's a minority, then you reported at much higher rates. The people who are the least risk for this vaccine also reported the high. Elderly people seem to be doing, or at least in their self-reporting, seem to be doing much better with the vaccine than younger people who are not. And look at this. I experience severe adverse effects, 18 to 29% is damn near double the national average. 30 to 44 is 5 compared to 3.5. 65 plus is 1.6. Right. I mean, Robert, what do you say to this?
That conforms to the data. I mean, what are they looking at? They're finding that there's issues two levels of risk taking place. One level
Yeah.
of risk is imminent. One level of risk is long term. For the imminent risk, even that, the long-term risk was always much higher the younger you are, disproportionately, right? Because you have 80 years, 70 years, 60 years
Yeah.
of expected additional life years. You have more risk because of the unknown factors of the vaccine than someone who has a life expectancy of 5 years, 10 years.
Right.
But
right.
even the short-term risk has a disproportionate age-driven profile. And it's well, the data coming back is that myocarditis, pericarditis is particularly at risk for young men. The
That's right.
neurological issues that are off the chart. I mean, what was interesting about your polling was it confirmed what's showing up in the European vaccine adverse event, their version of the reporting system that has more data than the U.S. system does. And it was showing a lot of women with issues concerning pregnancy,
Yeah,
issues concerning
absolutely.
neurological issues. And that's what we're seeing here as well. Disproportionately women, disproportionately younger, and that's where the reports are coming back. Not only that, like this will be a good, useful question down the road to ask people, how many of you know someone who's suffered a severe adverse effect from the virus versus a severe adverse effect from the vaccine?
Yeah,
I
serious
think
disease. Yes, with
because I'm
serious.
hearing from people, like a lot of their concerns of people that have decided not to take the vaccine is that in their experience, they've heard of a lot more concerns with vaccines than they have with the virus. They
Yeah.
know people that got the vaccine and something severe happened within days. Allison Morrow got suspended again for talking about issues related to this, but off YouTube, she detailed, she knew a friend where this where something severe had happened. And remember, originally they denied all this. They tried to pretend there were no issues, no problems.
That's
and they
right.
even did this with myocarditis and pericarditis initially. They said, "Oh no, this is a big myth." Yet all the fake.
That's misinformation. Misinformation.
And now, of course, CDC admits it's a risk of a serious adverse effect. And again, it's important to note what the CDC puts in its actual factual notice is that there are a bunch of potential serious adverse effects they don't know yet about.
Yeah.
Because it hasn't reached that level of clinical stage. That's where there's that popular meme where you have the rats sitting around saying, "I'm not taking the vaccine. They're testing it on humans right now."
I didn't see that, but that's hilarious. Yeah, I mean, Robert, we nested it by gender to show people on locals. And so we could have every age group, every race, whatever it may be. Women, when it comes to men, women tend to be reporting at higher rates than men. But when you get younger, and I'm trying to figure out a way to maybe target younger groups of people, because this is, of course, of registered voters. So we did, we did what we could with the methodology that we were using for the public polling project. But it, like you said, you were just pointing out the European data. That report came out days after I had been done packaging this up, and it jumped right out at me. Younger boys, why too? I got a son right in that age group, and he had COVID. All right, just to say, we all did. I told you, we called it a couple weeks ago. My kids kicked that crap in 48 hours, less than 48 hours, including my very young son, who's 2. All right. My wife and I took a few more days to get over it, but that was like a cult. I don't know what to say. I understand it's not for everybody. I get that. But there's no way in hell I'm jabbing my son and risking giving him myocarditis with the numbers that we just found and other people have found, and some of these studies in MedRx that we went over last week. There's no damn way. I don't care if there's a delta, a lambda, delta, lambda. All right. I don't try delta, lambda. I don't give a damn. I'm not doing it. I will pull my children out of school for this. I will. If public schools, I've just seen too much at this point. If public schools do this, then they've lost my children. They're out.
And think about the math. That's the next goal. I'll be working with Bobby Kennedy to file suit on that precise issue coming up. And Bobby Kennedy has a good book coming out on Fauci and Gates and all of how the corruption of public health has been. This is the
incredible
culmination of it. But I also wonder how much both employers, military, schools, they may think of this as 5%, 10%. They can't afford to lose that many people because of the way their financial basis operates and works. The idea that the New York City schools said the only way they could open up is if the mandate was enforced. What happens when 1 out of 6 security guards don't show up then.
Yeah.
Well, what then? I mean, they have not thought this through at all. And that's why, like, I tell people when they say, oh, they know what the risk is, it's like, point to me where the CDC has identified by individual stratified risk a comparison of the virus to the vaccine. You won't find it.
No.
In the history of the VAERS data, the reason for that question was the history of the VAERS data, according to a Harvard CDC-funded study, was that VAERS underestimated, not overestimated, underestimated the severity of injuries and injuries in general from vaccines by a ratio between 10 and 100x. And on average, it was 100 times. And because they studied a whole bunch of vaccine, massive study, hundreds of thousands of cases they looked at over multiple decades involving all kinds of vaccines. And remember, no vaccine has had the danger profile and safety signals that this one has. This one has had worse imminent effects. And remember, the big concerns with this vaccine were not short-term.
Be off the market already, Robert. Wouldn't it be
what
off
does
the
mRNA do long-term?
You're going to be off the market with numbers like this already. You said, we have never seen these.
Previously has been revoked with just 1/10 of these safety signals.
Yeah,
what your data confirms, for people that don't realize, 3.5% of everybody's taking the vaccine. You're talking about 5 million plus people with severe.
Thank you. What I'm trying to say is, it's only 3.5%, 4%. What? If 100 million people took it, then 3.5, 4. And remember, there's a 2.1 sampling error. It could be a little less, could be a little more. All right, we're talking about millions of people.
It doesn't include the people who died from it because they're dead. They're not in the poll.
They're not in the poll. They croaked. Exactly.
And compare that. 5 million people versus severe consequences from COVID is way less than that.
Well,
even by their crazy causation theory, where anything is called COVID, regardless of its real association.
That's what I was going to say, is that if you look at just Florida, and I know VAERS lags, right? But we can't get good age related data yet. We just can't. But if we just use what we found, and 16 overall from COVID, been below the age of 15 years old, we don't know what their histories were. That is nothing compared to the numbers that not only we found, but others have found. And there was where is it? I'm like scrolling for this MedRx study. We looked at. It came out last week. Here it is. Post-vaccination cardiac, Robert. Adverse event rates were higher than the hospitalization rates at both moderate periods like August 21st, 2021, and at high periods of hospitalization incidents for young boys. That's just cardiac events, not the entirety of adverse events. That's just cardiac related for young boys. Way more than their rates of hospitalization just for one adverse event, folks. One. Forget it.
And that's where, again, this is just the short-term risk, because the risk profile of COVID long-term is more known and less concerning than the long-term risk profile of the vaccines because of their novel technology.
Isn't that another lie? Right. Isn't that another lie Dr. Fauci has been telling from the beginning, where he said, well, we know, this year's year of vaccination data, we know that it would be immediate. You don't know that. It's an mRNA vaccine. It's not an antigen method.
It's the opposite. It's because we have no clue what an mRNA drug does to people long-term. No idea. We've never utilized it before. So, this is totally experimental. And there's a lot of doctors and scientists who've said, we simply don't. This was Brett Weinstein.
We don't know.
He was like,
we don't know.
Maybe there's no risk, but to say that now is a lie. We don't know the risk, and people should be honest and forthcoming. But what we're seeing is the data confirms that the communities and constituencies that are worried about the vaccine likely is based on their lived experience and risk and informed risk profile.
Right.
That they, in fact, reflect groups that are more at risk from the vaccine than from the virus. That's the reality.
Yeah, Dr. Roy, by the way, I listened to a lecture he gave. He basically said, look, if you have a doctor, any doctor on television, the one you go see in your neighborhood, any of them tells you or acts that they know everything. The truth is we don't know long
Well,
term. We just don't. And
here's
by the
what
way, he's like
doctors
the
know.
only one studying tissue of autopsied. You know,
Yeah.
if it,
Oh, I mean, there was the German doctors did a detail.
inflammation.
Another question people should ask: why have autopsies mostly disappeared?
Yeah,
Why aren't they doing autopsies?
he's
They've
having a
said
hard
it's
time getting them,
quote,
Robert.
it's too risky to do autopsies.
Yeah,
To actually do. They say they're researching and vetting the VAERS data. No, they're not. CDC is not vetting the
It's
data
a
at
lie.
all. They're deliberately sticking their head in the sand, pretending it doesn't exist, and pretending it doesn't mean what it means. I mean, ask yourself why they have to keep circumventing and ignoring their own advisory committee of deeply pro-vaccine, pro-drug people. People, that advisory committee is not exactly an anti-vaccine or
That's right.
anti-drug
And
community.
they overruled it. It was
Yes,
a
they
political
overruled
decision.
and ignored him for the full authorization of the vaccine in the first place. And then you have the great research done, undercover reporting by Project Veritas, where you're finding
Incredible.
the CDC people talking about how they're not doing meaningful reviews of the VAERS data, talking about how even Johnson & Johnson are like, kids should never take this thing. That's insane. And yet, that's the march forward.
That was just trending again today. Johnson and Johnson. You out of your damn minds? You out of your minds? I mean,
And it's what the UK advisory committee revised their government. They said, no, they acknowledged, even with their limitations and political prejudices, which is very deeply pro-vaccine, that's why they got their position, said people under 12 should not take the vaccine because the risk profile is disproportionate toward the vaccine.
Yeah, here, I made it bigger so people can see. One of the locals people, we had put up all the demographics to cross with it, also said, hey, can you throw the booster status in there with the adverse events? And I don't know why I didn't think about doing it. But we just started to track also now that the boosters are available. We'll start asking them whether they have gotten it as well. But when we did this, you remember the Biden administration was fumbling the booster rollout. They didn't know what it was going to be, 65 plus or not at all. How, what year, they just screwed it up like they screwed up everything else. So we had, I intend to get a booster and I have no plans to get a booster. So you can see right off the bat here that about 20%, will not get the booster. They have no intention of getting it. If they have been vaccinated, it's even higher. And when we looked, I experienced severe adverse effects that prevent daily activity. 10%, I have no plans to get the booster. 10%.
Right. It's people who've
how
experienced
could we just
it.
ignore this, man? How could you just ignore it?
Many of the people that I've talked to that are vaccine hesitant or skeptical know someone or themselves experienced an adverse event from like the first shot, or know someone who did, or have family who died who did.
Yeah, I have a family member right now that I'm dealing with that ran out. He's an older male and he's not that healthy. So, I remember talking to him and he's like, what do you think I should do? So I think you should talk to your doctor. You got problems, and he did get it. He didn't have any adverse events, thank God, but now he knows somebody, it's 2 doors down, and wheeled out on a gurney. Marked down as a COVID death, by the way. And
a lot of these are a lot of what may be vaccine deaths are being listed as COVID deaths.
So now he doesn't want the booster. He said, you know what? I will pay 20 if my insurance doesn't cover it, I'll pay $25 at the Publix to be tested for antibodies when this booster comes out. And when my doctor inevitably asks me when are you going to go get the booster? Because if I still have the antibodies, the hell with
out
it.
There. The doctor, here's what doctors do know. Doctors know if they advise you to get the vaccine and it turns out their advice was wrong, you can never sue them.
That's right.
No licensing board will do anything against them. Whereas Robert, if they give you advice that's counter to the vaccine, then they can be sued and they can be defrocked.
Man.
There's only risk for a doctor by questioning a vaccine. There's only reward by pushing the vaccine. And so that's why you won't get what people are discovering to their shock is how corrupted medical institutions are, including their own doctors.
That's what I was going to ask you, though. Why are they that shocked?
Information, and then they find out, nope.
That's what I was going to ask you, though, Robert. Why the hell are they that shocked? These are the same people who took cruises and vacations of other sorts to tell you Oxycontin was safe. I mean, what the hell is wrong with you people? I mean, how gullible are you? The last swine flu vaccine, how do you think they promoted that? I mean, they had everybody telling you how, and I'm getting, I know the YouTube hates this crap, but that's a fact. I mean, that is the last large class action suit over that vaccine. So I just don't understand why.
Because a few years later, they passed the law to immunize it. And that's what the current goal is. The reason why they want it on
now
the
they're
kids
insulated
list is if they get on the kids list, they're fully immune. Like right now, they're all emergency. The only available vaccines are emergency use authorized ones.
Right.
As soon as the licensed ones are available, they're in a little bit of legal limbo as to whether or not they can be sued or not. They don't want to be in legal limbo.
Explain that, because people don't understand. It is technically the same product, just with two names. And so they're not liable. Can you explain that a little bit more to people? I get this question all the time. It's a loophole. It's a loophole.
Right now, under the emergency use authorization statute, they can't authorize something to be emergency use authorization if the FDA has issued a biologic license for that product's use for that purpose. So the big question when they granted the biologic license application of Pfizer was, okay, then you're going to revoke the EUAs, right? For Moderna, Pfizer, and Johnson and Johnson. But of course, Moderna and Johnson don't want that to happen, and then Pfizer doesn't want to be stuck in what that might mean to them legally, because all emergency use authorized vaccines complete immunity no matter what. I mean, you have to show criminal willfulness, and the Department of Justice has to join your case. That has never happened in the history of that law. So they know they're basically fully immune.
Yeah, Fauci, another reason why he's full of crap, by the way. That answer was egregiously false.
It's deliberately deceptive. They've set up a fund that's a much more limited fund under the EUA laws that has almost never pays out any money. So it's just because they have a whole different definition of causation when it comes to vaccine injuries than they do to COVID injuries.
Yeah.
Just radically opposite. Couldn't be more contrary. It exposes the scam that's taken place. But that's issue one. Once it goes to a biologic licensed, it might be, it goes into legal limbo. It no longer has emergency use authorized immunity, but it may have pandemic time period immunity, but that's unclear. And at a minimum, once there's no pandemic, it's not immune. So what they want to have happen, they don't want to be in legal limbo ever. So they want to stay emergency use authorization until it's both licensed and on the kids list. Because once it's on the kids immunity list, the required kids vaccination list, then it also obtains immunity again. So
and that will happen soon, folks. That's coming soon.
That's why what they wanted to have happen was to have people believe there was a biologic licensed product available as a COVID vaccine, particularly soldiers and others. But they didn't want to actually make that one available because that puts them in legal limbo for legal risk. And so for that reason, they approved it while pretending it's unavailable, even though according to the FDA, it's medically interchangeable. Well, if it's medically interchangeable, give it the license and revoke the other ones. But they don't want to do that because the big pharma, this just shows CDC works for big pharma.
Absolutely.
My old debate with Ralph Nader was all these regulatory agencies, he kept getting frustrated. He would push for their creation and then watch them be captured by the very institutions they were supposed to limit. Yeah. It's like that's always going to happen. It's the nature of the state. It's the nature of government. Yeah. You're going to have these administrative bureaucrats want to get enriched and rewarded and politically protected by the most powerful groups they deal with. They're not going to work for the people. They're always going to work for the big polluters if they're the EPA, or work for the big pharma if they're in the drug industry, or work for the defense industry if they're in the military. That's just the nature of the animal. And he was always just naive and idealistic about that. Has partially come to terms, but not fully. But people are just now witnessing it in full scale because they're seeing the complete lack of scientific methodology being applied here. The complete absence of meaningful legal informed consent that we're supposed to impose since the Nuremberg Code of 1947. And we're seeing the professional class writ large thinks they should be in control, and whoever the authority figures are within the professional class is the only people they listen to. And that's why judges will be a problem. And that's why political pressure in the court of public opinion is critical. And massive pushback is critical. It's why Bobby Kennedy's spending all his time on a book. Like, rather than focusing on suits right now, he understands if he doesn't win in the court of public opinion, we have no shot with the courts, because their prejudice is, well, the CDC said so. Well, the FDA said so.
That was that trap all the time, by the way. People were like, oh, it's not FDA approved. It's not FDA approved. And I said, that is a trap. All right. If this is where if you want to avoid mandates, if you want to go down the road of using FDA approval as a crutch, they're going to throw a curveball at you. And that's what they did with this so-called approval. That's not really an approval.
It was a
complete bait and switch, man.
There is no available, approved, biologic licensed vaccine in the United States today, and it's not known when there will be.
Yeah, and the studies that are usually required, when is the myocarditis study? 2025 or something, right?
Yes.
2025, folks.
Almost all these, like pregnancy.
4 years, 3.5 years.
We'll know in about 3 years. We'll know in about 3 years whether or not it turns out to, interesting information on the flu vaccine, which shares certain aspects. The flu vaccine tries to treat a similar respiratory virus. Massive levels of miscarriages.
Yeah, well, if you're a woman who has children under the age of 18, it was interesting because if your children are over 18, then obviously you're going to tend to be older. And remember the trend we found with age, the younger people actually have more problems. If you're a woman with young children, you have reported higher adverse events. Significantly.
Well, think about it. The virus looks like Bill Gates' dream of a virus, acts as a de facto death panel, and the vaccine seems to act like a de facto Bill Gates' dream vaccine with a disproportionate effect on minorities and young women. Just saying.
Yeah, it makes it's real damn convenient. Yeah, and I'm trying to actually, because I have male and female nested. So one or more school-age children under 18, 6%, Robert. 6%. No children, 2.6.
Well, remember they originally
telling me there's not something wrong there?
Off the charts of all kinds of issues with menstruation cycles by women after they got the vaccine.
Yeah,
and they initially tried to totally pretend it didn't exist, same pattern. And now the CDC comes out and says, okay, maybe we should study that. Well, maybe you should study it before you give it to people.
It's actually worse.
Give it to people.
I didn't have male-female checked. It's actually worse. Age, one or more school-aged child under the age of 18. Men, 3.6, right around the national average. Women, 8.3. Guys, this is a huge sample. The sampling error is small. It's important to know what it is, but this is outside the sampling error. The disparity is outside the sampling error. Forget about what the actual, and I'm not talking about other adverse events, or I'm just talking about severe. 25.2% said they had moderate ones, and 41% said they had mild ones.
And this would be consistent with the history of VAERS data underestimating things by 100x.
That's right.
That's that's what is coming about.
Which means we have 130,000 instead, at least. By
the way, people studying the all-cause mortality chart, that's the number they've concluded, like in terms of deaths, because it just using that they estimate 130 to 200,000 deaths that have been caused by the vaccine already. That's what they estimate using their statistical studies. Matthew Crawford and others.
This is why Roy can't get bodies. Right. He can't get the damn bodies. That's what he does for a living, folks. He dissects people to see what the hell they died of. And if there's any problem.
The excess death charts look particularly like the people reporting severe adverse events. Disproportionately younger groups that are seeing excess deaths, which shouldn't be happening. There's just no reason. Excess deaths should be declining. It shouldn't be over, period, but it definitely shouldn't be over with that group. And so, and often you look at Singapore, you look at a lot of, obviously Israel, which keeps screaming
Israel's
signal problems off the charts. But Singapore did, their death rate tripled, quadrupled after they introduced mass vaccination. In terms of what was identified as COVID risk. So it's like, how did that happen? Unless people are being listed as COVID deaths that might actually be vaccine deaths.
That's right. And there's some, for people who did not see this, You should check it out too, Robert. I mean, the people who got me who hired us to do the poll in Georgia, I was scanning their website, looking at the polling, and I was looking at, they have done a series on people that they haven't. These are people, individual cases, and the one really got me because her name is, a lot of people hide their name for for fear of retribution or whatever, but Anna, who's a healthcare worker, her body is basically telling it to kill itself now. And it started right away with severe soreness and pain in the area of injection. Then it went to Coca-Cola colored urine, and a couple hours later, and it just has been downhill since there. I mean, her nervous system is basically telling her skin too that you're dead. I mean, it's weird what's happening to her. And it's just, I don't know how the hell you could just ignore this stuff. And I'm thinking back to this. It was a focus group Mark Halpern had on Newsmax. And they had like 4 Biden voters and 4 Trump voters to prove or to demonstrate how political this issue is, how political it's become. A minority young Trump voter from Texas got into it with a white liberal, I believe she was like from Ohio, who was a Biden voter, which is weird. I know it was a big Trump state, but you could clearly see upper class, very upper class, yuppie woman. And no offense, it's true. Karen-like, wasp-like, whatever you want to call it. He is trying to explain his experience and then how many people he knows who has personally who had an issue. And instead of being able to counter, and by the way, she was an older woman. Again, very important. There's a young minority Trump voter and an old white rich Biden voter, and who's looking at just keep that in mind, with keep what we found with our results in the back of your mind. She called him a liar. She said, that didn't happen to you. I mean, it was just mind-blowing, Robert. Like, you're reduced to just dismissing or ignoring, that something. It's pathetic, man.
It's religious level commitment.
It's religious level commitment, dude. Exactly. Tucker, his monologue, I don't know if you saw that the other day. Yeah. Dead on. They have completely replaced, where God is supposed to be in their heart. They have completely replaced that with this COVID mania. It's nuts.
Yep. Yeah, completely. And so, I mean, I think it's only going to continue to grow. I mean, I think I see Biden's not going to be able to get through his budget proposals. Afghanistan is one of the worst foreign policy disasters in American history. His COVID policies are undermining rather than expanding his support, particularly with key working class Democratic constituencies, as is reflected in popular culture, as is reflected in what's happening in New York and BLM protest on the vaccine mandate and vaccine passports, et cetera. And I just see it getting worse. I mean, I don't see any short-term or midterm solution for Democrats that right now they're going to get wiped out in 2022, not only in the House and in the Senate, but a lot of key governorships. I mean, look at Whitmer trying to pretend she's now against passports.
Trailing Craig like crazy.
Trying to pretend. I mean, she's DOA in Michigan. Democrats are DOA, are close to it increasingly in Pennsylvania and Wisconsin, in my view.
Wisconsin, too, I think, too. That governor's race is going to get hard for them to hold.
And I think as long as Republicans nominate someone smart in Georgia and Arizona, they're going to walk in without much of a hurdle at all. Democrats are nervous out here in Nevada. I mean, they're begging for money every other day and talking about how they're politically exposed.
3 and
a lot of Trumpish populists campaigning for both the House and the Senate. You'll get, J.D. Vance, Blake Masters, Herschel Walker, Eric Greitens. I mean, going on.
I got to get Blake Masters on.
I mean, you'll have the most populist group of Republicans since the 1920s.
Yeah, without a doubt, Robert. Even in, I'm telling you, keep an eye on California 16, folks. That district could go. We're talking about a district. Jim Costa won by 20 points. It voted to throw out Gavin Newsom, and this is an area. Joe Biden won what? He won Merced by like 11. He won Fresno by like 8. And these are places that voted yes, while Orange County and San Diego voted to keep him in office. So what? Robert's most striking finding out of the exit polling in California, white men and Hispanic men voted almost identical. I mean, 1 point difference. 1 point difference. So it's a totally new map. If Republicans do, or not even do, just acknowledge what Robert just said is true, man. I mean, just acknowledge it. Then you have Texas 15, Wisconsin 3, California 16. The Democrats are, in bricks over Nevada 3, Virginia 7, definitely back in play. I mean, this is just it's a whole new world. It's a whole new map. It's a whole new world.
They've doubled down on professional class patronage and ignored their working class base.
Yeah.
And if Republicans have an IQ over 50, which can be in doubt, then they can take advantage of this substantially. I mean, I'm amazed. People that were like, man, I'm shocked at BLM joining up on vaccine. I was like, that was guaranteed to happen.
Yeah.
I know a lot of people in that world, and they were never happy with the idea of vaccine mandates.
So,
never vaccine passports. They see it for precisely what it is. There's a long history of knowledge of understanding how the government lies repeatedly, precisely in these contexts, and they weren't interested in being part of a medical experiment.
Right.
And Republicans were just slow to wake up to it. But now that they are, then in a certain ex-president needs to fully embrace it. At least he's no longer preaching the wonders of his speed vaccines, but he needs to wake up fully. He talked about unconstitutional mandates last time, but he needs to wake up fully, because where the zeitgeist is in strong opposition to these kind of protocols and policies, particularly amongst the working class communities, independents, and others that he and Republicans need to dominate in 2022 and in 2024
and beyond. Yeah. All right. Last question. We'll wrap it up, Robert. Bob Woodward said he's all but in now. So Woodward's a crackpot, but I think he's probably right.
Well, I think it's what we discussed. I think 3 months ago.
Yeah.
It was clear to me when he made certain statements on Dave Rubin's interview that he was in.
He's in. Yeah.
That the kind of statements he made were revelatory. He almost slipped up and said it fully on Rubin's interview.
He did, man. He was that close. He almost.
I heard. I was like, okay, he's planning on running again. And he did it in his classic humorous way. He said, "Unless I get a certain call from a doctor, I'm in." And I have no doubt that he was never going to take this loss any other way. The key for Trump is surrounding himself with a lot better advisors. And that's still very much a work in progress.
Tell people where they can find you, Robert.
Oh, yeah. For all the kind of information on vaccine mandate cases, Arizona audit, all that stuff, uncensored at vivabarneslaw.locals.com.
All the best, my friend. I'll see you next week, okay?
Mañana.
All right, folks, that was Robert Barnes. As always, I'm going to just leave you with this real quick before I give you the outro music here. Just talking about Trump, we haven't gotten a chance to dive a little bit more deeper into that lead that we saw he had over Joe Biden nationally, and really, not glance over it, but recap, show what we didn't go over, and then show in Georgia the coalition that now cannot stand Joe Biden. These were the voters that supposedly put Joe Biden over everywhere. And now if they were Trump voters who voted for Biden, they are way back on the Trump train. If they are independents or third-party voters who voted for Biden or didn't vote last time, then they back Trump by whatever. Third-party voters are a little bit less, but independents are pretty overwhelming for that group of vote. And then, either that or we'll vote for somebody else or something. So my point is, it looks a lot more like 2016. And if that's true, Trump has pretty big lead here among some groups he didn't have a lead with like that last time, folks. He just didn't. The race was close because of the Electoral College. So rest assured, if this is the way, the direction these things are moving, then at the state level, it's a freaking landslide. And I know we have a long way to go, but it's only, like Robert said, it's only going to get worse. Joe Biden is not going to tomorrow mysteriously pull his head out of his failing butt and get better The people around him are like the junior varsity of Team Obama. They're not going to get better. It's not going to get better. And that's why now we see distrust with COVID and disapproval of COVID going up. That's all he had. I just want to dig deeper into those numbers because, like I said, some of these people who tell us, no, I'd vote for Trump. I would never, in August leading up to October and right up to the election last November, I would never have thought those people would ever vote for Donald Trump. That's just not what made it close, not those people. So it's really an astonishing turn of events. All right, I'm getting the hell out of here. You can also follow me uncensored, peoplespundit.locals.com. Of course, I'm still on Twitter, but also now on Getter at People's Pundit. All right, folks, I'm going to go. I will see you locals tomorrow. Or no, I'll see everybody tomorrow. That's right, it's Tuesday. And I'll see locals even sooner than that. All right, guys, have a good night. Thanks for watching Inside the Numbers.
Shine down over dotted lines of white across an open highway. Restless nights, coffee houses, buzzing neon lights. I rock the people my way, working my way, coming back to you. Working my way, coming back. Take me home tonight, not wasting it. Overdrive from town to town and in between. I see you in the morning.